in chaos, there's more opportunity. And I remember saying in the interview, do you have the appetite to get crazy?
Yeah.
And it got some laughs, and then someone said, what does that mean exactly? The response they had to me encouraged me that this was the right opportunity.
Tim Pernetti,
the Commissioner of the American Athletic Conference.
I thought about it a lot even during the interview process. The American Athletic Conference. Like, I think we have the best word
No doubt.
in our conference name that anybody could possibly have. My job at the end of the day is to vet every opportunity that's out there for the American that could create value for the enterprise. At the same time, more is not always more. You know, I got Rutgers into the Big Ten. I've never felt higher professionally, especially because it was my school. And 90 days later, I got fired. But sometimes it takes getting stuck holding the bag on something really difficult to really test who you are and your character. You know, when I was 12, he got cancer. When I was 13, he was gone. It broke me because I was really close with my dad. What would this have meant for my father, who loved college football, to be able to see this? I had to overcome that on game day every day for 4 years. If I didn't have that experience, I think I'd be different. I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
What's up, guys? Welcome into the next podcast. I'm your host, Adam Brenneman. We're in Atlanta at the National Championship game, and I'm about to sit down with the American Conference Commissioner, Tim Pernetti. Tim Pernetti is really turning the American into one of the premier conferences in college football. He's rebranded the conference, and to me, they're probably the best non-Power 4 conference in the sport right now. You're going to love the conversation with Tim Pernetti about leadership, shaping the conference, the future of college football, revenue sharing, NIL, everything you can imagine. It's a great conversation. Before we get to the episode, please subscribe to this podcast. Leave a like, leave a review, a comment, share it with a friend. All your guys' support allows me to travel around the country and interview the biggest names in sports. Let's go talk to Tim Pernetti. We're good? Mics are working? It's always the worst if the mics don't work.
Yeah, right. That would be bad.
Yeah. We're good? Cool. Well, Commissioner, appreciate you doing this. Appreciate you being here on a very busy weekend for you, I'm sure.
I prioritized this, though. When you guys called, I was like, plan everything else around this thing.
I appreciate you being here. So much I want to talk to you about with, your background in media, your background as the athletic director at Rutgers, now the Commissioner of the American. I want to start with when you became the commissioner in, 2023? Your first?
No, actually, right in June 3rd of 2024. So I've been on the job a little more than 6 months now.
That's right. Yep. So hasn't been long, but when you got the job, kind of week one, what were the first couple things that maybe surprised you, or that you kind of said, okay, we got to handle this right away?
Well, the first thing was just, I felt like we needed to have more of a presence with each other.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is the first thing I decided in my head, and it was probably way too ambitious at the time.
Yeah.
I said to myself, okay, it's June 3rd, and I took out a piece of paper and I started a plan. I said, I'm going to get on every campus before football media day, which was 6 weeks out.
Yeah.
And what I should have remembered from working on a campus that I didn't remember is, I'm not going to catch anybody on campus in the
No one's
summer.
there, right?
So I didn't really get a lot of visits done the first 6 weeks, but what it enabled me to do was dial back a little bit and start to think about the commercial opportunities and some of the business opportunities that I pitched during my interview, that we could spend that time in the summer to sort of accelerate the dialogue.
Yeah.
But I don't think, having worked on the media side of college sports, on the acquisition side, and then worked on a campus, and then done a startup at CSTV and sort of ran IMG College, like, I saw the industry from a lot of angles.
Yeah. And
this was an angle I hadn't seen it from, but I wasn't really surprised by a lot because I lived it in a lot of different lives.
Yeah.
But certainly the hardest part, the surprising part throughout has just been, like, there's a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversations, a lot of consensus that you have to build. And with 15 members in our conference, like, I wonder if I'm ever going to get a 15-0 vote.
Yeah, exactly,
So it's that part of it surprised me a little bit, but it was really a smooth transition, and I was really welcomed in by the members.
From a leadership standpoint, when you become the commissioner, did you kind of set forth a list of priorities or a list of things that you wanted to get done in the first year? Like, how do you kind of approach that from, when you get it and you're deciding what are the important things that need to happen?
I did. And I have and I don't know where I got this from, but I've had a lot of really fun, I've been lucky. I've had a lot of fun opportunities in my career. but I've developed over time is when you go into something new, it's easy to come in with your bat on your shoulder and start swinging and changing and just moving. But I wanted to come in and really start to evaluate people, evaluate not only people in the conference office, but people on our campuses and listen to what everybody had to say. And as you can imagine, I went to 15 places, I heard 15 different things, right? And then I realized that was really daunting, which is there's some commonalities, but everybody has their own set of circumstances. But what we wanted to set forth in the beginning was, and we did, was let's embrace the foundation of what has been built here. Because my predecessor, Mike Oresco, he was a commissioner of the Big East Conference when he took the job. I was AD at Rutgers at the time. I took Rutgers out of the Big East to the Big Ten, and the American became a thing shortly thereafter. You have to get your arms around what has been built and embrace that foundation. But then we wanted to very quickly get on to getting more progressive in how we think about everything. Like in 5 years, if we do this down the road, I want this conference to be known as the most innovative conference in collegiate athletics. To be known as innovative, you have to talk about change and you have to have the guts to actually foster change. So we very quickly got on to like, let's embrace what's been built, but let's build the future. Let's think progressively. Let's take bigger swings. Let's be first movers on some things, whether it's conference naming rights or private capital investment, whatever it is, because this industry is not what it was 20 years ago.
Much different, right? Much different.
Oh my
5
God.
years ago.
Yeah.
So many of the people that watch this podcast are coaches, but also sports business young professionals that want to be an AD or a commissioner. Take me through the process of actually getting the job. Like, what does that look like behind the scenes of search committee interviews when you actually find out you're getting it?
Yeah, it's some of it you'd expect and some you wouldn't expect. When I got the call, I had a really incredible run and incredible colleagues at IMG. I was at IMG at the company for 10 years, had the opportunity to run different businesses, worked for incredible people. And after we sold IMG Academy to private equity, I was continuing on in the job and really enjoying what I was doing. When I got this call about it, I wasn't sure at first. And I think everybody's hesitancy is, well, collegiate athletics is a mess. And everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute. But when I thought about it, I thought, this is the right time to do it because in chaos, there's more opportunity. So how the process went was I took an initial call from, Len Perna and the guys at Turnkey. I did a Zoom with a small group of presidents and I went pretty hard in the first one because I thought to myself, I'm in a great spot. And I remember saying in the interview, they said, do you have any questions for us? I said, do you have the appetite to get crazy? And it got some laughs. And then someone said, what does that mean exactly? I said, do you have the appetite to do things differently that haven't been done before? And I brought up some of these things that I'm talking to you about. The response they had to me encouraged me that this was the right opportunity because it was a group of presidents that said, we're interested in being different, but we have to figure out how to do it. We're looking for someone to help us and show us how to do it. And then you have a series of other meetings and then they fly you in person. They put candidates probably in separate hotels. You have a final interview and literally you go to your room and you wait for the phone call to see who's going to get it. And, I interviewed for the Big 12 years ago at the same time when Brett Yormark got hired, who was my friend. And I sat in the hotel and waited and I got the call that I didn't get it. So this time around, I was having like that deja vu, but I was trying to sort of keep it positive throughout. But they literally call you down, they tell you got it, and you're on the job the next day. And you know how it is, like due respect to what you do. The second a president in that room decides who it's going to be, you're too late to tell anybody because it's already tweeted and leaked and everything else.
Did you change anything about your interview process between the Big 12 commissioner job and the American?
I really learned a lot. And the thing about interviews, I tell people this all the time. I tell my own sons are in their early 20s and they just started working. And my older son said something about another opportunity in an interview. And I said, if it's something that's interesting, interview, even if you're not sure you want to do it, because interviews are reps. And the room at the Big 12 was very different than the room, personality-wise and everything else. But I did learn some things in the Big 12 interview process that I definitely applied, the next time around. And the one thing was, I think I maybe was a little formal in that one. And this one, I said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to be a different person if I get this job. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to be casual and loose and conversational and be me. So you definitely pick some things up from one thing to the next.
One of the things I've loved, even in the last, your short tenure so far with the American, is just you've made an emphasis on the branding, I feel like. And I mean, even the branding around calling it the American, right? And
I feel like all that's probably intentional in how you brand the conference and social media and even the TV deal, like things like that. Has that been a priority for you to kind of, not change, but enhance the vibe of the American Conference?
It has, because the brand it's a baby. Like, it's still in its infancy. This conference has been around for 14 years. And I thought about it a lot even during the interview process. The American Athletic Conference. And the first thing I thought to myself was athletic. Like, this is a college conference.
Mm-hmm.
Atlantic Coast Conference, Big 12 Conference, Southeastern Conference. Maybe we should think about how to shape this around something that is meaningful and has broad-based appeal. And it was American.
Yeah.
Like, I think we have the best word
No doubt
in our conference name that anybody could possibly have. So, and we've already started that process. We started immediately working with a consultant on doing a brand study. And we had hundreds of people on the campuses participate in this just to understand what it meant and, what makes sense. And we asked hundreds of people, what does the brand mean? And we got 100 different answers. And it was time to sort of narrow it, better define it, build the tenets of what it means, and simplify even how we call it. Like, I know you're calling some of our games on CBS Sports Network. I'm going to be on our media partners this offseason to stop using AAC and calling it the American Conference. But it is intentional because we want it to be understandable. We want people to know what it means, and we want it to have impact when it's said. But like I said, we have a great word to start with, and we're just going to build around that.
The good news is that's been drilled in my brain already from the CBS, from the executives. Good. It's the American. Not
Good, it's
the
working already.
No doubt, it's great. I mean, it does. You're right. It's the best name you could possibly get. It just sounds better than the other conferences.
It does.
How many miles have you logged since you got the job?
Last year, was crazy.
On
because,
the tour, the 15
Yeah, I mean,
stops,
if I cut January to June out for my old job, I traveled, easily traveled like more than 250,000 miles in 6 months. When you get a personal phone call from someone at United Airlines to thank you for your loyalty.
I was going to say, how many points you have?
And the flight attendants, instead of saying, "Oh, welcome aboard, sir," they say, "Tim, what's going on?" Like, you're spending a lot of time on a plane. But as I mentioned to you earlier, I really felt like it was important to get in front of people early on. And even though I couldn't get all the visits done before Football Media Day, I did shortly thereafter. I went to every campus for at least one football game. And it wasn't just like, hey, who can I meet? I wanted to spend time with the president, other administrators, faculty reps. I'd spend time with student athletes on the campus. And I really just sponged it up. And the question I asked everybody was the same. I said, take the magic wand and tell me what you would change about your experience. And at the core of whatever I'm able to do, however long I'm able to be in this job, is going to be experience. Like, you think about it, we were talking about it before. Think about your experience playing college football. Mine changed me. And as much as we're talking about NIL and transfer portal and money, we have to stay focused on, these are young kids that selected a place because they think it's going to give them the best experience. That's our responsibility to deliver it.
I want to dive into your time as the athletic director at Rutgers, and you took Rutgers from the Big East to the Big Ten Conference, which was monumental at the time. What can you give me the behind the scenes of how that goes down? How did that? I'm sure long process. That could probably be a whole podcast in itself. But but just the inside baseball. How do you go about, when you're an athletic director, changing your conference?
Yeah, it's not easy, but you have to have some qualities that you can sell that are really, really valuable and important in the space. So when I got the call about interviewing for Rutgers, I immediately responded that I wanted to interview because I went to school there. I played football there. I met my wife who played lacrosse there. Like, it was meaningful to us, but I wasn't sure I wanted to be an athletic director. When I got into the job and interviewed the first time, I left the interview and I called my wife and I said, I want this job. And she said, why? I said, they're sitting on a gold mine and they don't know what it is. And it was New York. And just coming out of the CSTV venture, which we sold to CBS, and the Big Ten Network launched their network, and then other networks are coming up. It was all about New York. So how does it go? It's 4 years. I called Jim Delaney the night before my final interview because he was a reference. And I said, hey, what are the chances we're getting Rutgers in the Big Ten? Which I had talked to him about for years. And he laughed and he said less than 5%. And I said, well, that's not zero. But Jim and I had a cadence for 4 years talking about this. And we didn't get in the year Nebraska got in, but we talked about the big market strategy. And what we did was we said, this is going to be about the market. And we had a story out there every single day about something that was going on at Rutgers. Syracuse claimed to be New York's college team one year, and I gave the New York Times all the college football ratings for the last 5 years, the top 10 games. Rutgers played at every one of them, and Syracuse played in 0. So it's strategic. You have to create a narrative around it. But when it came down to it, in 2012, the Big Ten deployed their big market strategy, and it was Rutgers and Maryland. But that doesn't mean it's over. Like the negotiating that goes on, the nervousness you have, the pressure you carry on your shoulders to deliver for the fan base. But make no mistake about that deal. Rutgers has great assets. That was a media contract. That gave the Big Ten network $500 million more per year in revenue by being in New York on basic cable.
Well, I mean, with your background in moving conferences, I got to ask about the American and conference expansion and realignment. It seems it's so much it's hard to even keep up with, right? Of what teams are moving conferences. What's your strategy in that landscape of you got the other teams moving around, programs moving around? How do you approach it?
So my experience at Rutgers really helped me for this time around, which was just 5 months ago. But at the core of the Big Ten deal was one relationship. Like I met Jim Delaney when I was in my early 20s, when I was a TV executive. That relationship is the reason that deal gets done. So now I'm on the other side of it, where I'm looking at a conference that has looked like a different conference many times over the last 10 years. So at a time where poaching starts to brim itself to the top, you have a choice, which is you are a salesman or you're a partner. And I chose the partner because I knew that there were things that were going to be pitched that were speculative. And what I said to our schools was, take the meetings, get the proposals. Here are some questions to ask, and then come back. And we're going to bring experts in to separate fact from fiction for you. Because at the end of the day, what I told them is, we have exit fees and bylaws. I can't stop you from leaving, but I can stop you from making a decision that's ill-informed. So I acted more like a consultant than anything. And it really played out really, really well. Not because of my strategy, but just because those 4 schools that were talked about and we were at the table working on this together. And then I would sit back and I watched them being transparent with each other. It developed a unity in the conference that I hadn't felt when I started the job. But I think when you're a commissioner, that's always hanging over your head. So you could either worry about it or you could focus on trying to make the conference a place that people want to come and want to stay. And that's all about all these new revenue opportunities and things that we can be a first mover on that haven't been done in the past.
And then the other part of it is expansion, right? And expanding the conference and looking at other opportunities, whether it be FCS to FBS to other conferences. How do you approach the expansion part? Is that something that you're always looking at?
Always. And the exciting part for me, I wondered, Adam, when I got the job, I was like, I wonder what institutions out there see this as a great destination. And then in the first 60 days, I was really encouraged by the phone calls I was receiving. My job at the end of the day is to vet every opportunity that's out there for the American that could create value for the enterprise and for the membership. So I'm taking every call. At the same time, more is not always more. Right? And as I look at expansion, the thing that discourages me is like, when is somebody going to stop trying to tear somebody else down and think about coming together and building something that's never been built before, whether it's a national conference or anything like that. But you just have to be listening to everyone, because I always think back, like Jim Delaney and I got this historic deal done. Why? It was the relationship. So when I hear from a president, you talk, you develop a relationship, you get closer, you learn more, you could share information. And if there's an opportunity there down the road, it has to create incremental value or it doesn't make sense for our membership.
I want to dive into a couple of the issues or topics in college football with you. I'll start with the first one is, the college football playoff gets kind of renegotiated in 2026. And right now the non-Power 4 schools get one automatic bid in the playoffs, obviously. Do you think that will be the case in 2026? How do you approach that? I'm assuming you're a proponent of the one automatic bid to the playoffs. But there was a lot of, chatter this year about the automatic bye that Boise State got and everything. So just what are your thoughts on that as a whole?
I think there's a lot of things on the table. And what everybody will very quickly get to is like, well, things have to change. And so long as they're evolving, I think it's good. And remember, this is the first year of a 12-team playoff. Here's what we know. Viewership is off the charts.
Turned out pretty well.
The optics are great. The matchups in some places have been very competitive. I mean, if you look at the semifinals leading into this game, I think everybody's very, very optimistic about what could happen. But the chatter about, do the 4 teams that get a bye, Do they have to be conference champions?
Mhm.
Should there be a reseeding after the first round? These are all things I think the commissioners have a responsibility to throw on the table, because the one thing I've told people all year is the 5 highest ranked conference champions
Mhm.
go to the playoff.
Mhm.
And there was a time during the season where I said, if Army or Tulane wins
No doubt.
out, Boise and one of them
Yeah.
are going to be in the
No doubt.
playoff, and they could be 2 of the 5
Mhm.
conference champions. So access is
Yeah.
really, really important. But Adam,
Yeah.
access has to expand
Yeah.
for everyone. Like, it
Mhm.
can't expand for some at the cost of others. Are we really going to call this a national playoff?
Yeah.
Then let's be inclusive about it so
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I remember calling the Army games and, making the case for how they get to the college football playoff. I mean, it was a real chance at one point there for
Sure.
a while, especially with the Notre Dame game that was played. How about NIL? I mean, that so many ways to go with this question. Revenue sharing, the house settlement's going to come, changes a lot of things for schools with the revenue sharing, the cap, and then just NIL and what collectives play in it. And I'm sure it's something that you're talking to your member schools about all the time. We're sitting here in January 25. Say a year from now, what do you think NIL actually looks like at the college level?
My hope
Mhm.
is this, that, we're going to have a new administration in Washington, D.C., a lot of things are going to change. The one thing about NIL that was missed, and is going to be very hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube,
Mhm.
is state legislators are not dumb.
Mhm.
Some of them are creating legislation to directly benefit their state schools.
Yeah.
But we can't have this patchwork of different
All
state
different.
laws.
Yeah.
Like, if the government could do anything to help us with NIL, it's to create consistent federal legislation on how it works. To even it out, I think that gives us a fighting chance.
Yeah.
As far as what it could look like in the future, I think it's great that student athletes can do this. And people are like, oh my God, this quarterback's is making more money next year than 4 NFL quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Well, he may not have the opportunity to play in the NFL. Like,
Mhm.
who wouldn't capitalize on that while they can?
Yeah.
I support student athletes' ability to do that. And it's also got to continue to evolve. It has to be created in a consistent way.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the industry is missed.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. People are using it to create recruiting advantages.
Yeah.
And the reality is this, even if it's federally governed,
Mhm.
some schools are going to have more resources than others. Like,
Yeah.
there's always going to be the gap
Yeah.
between some and others, but it should continue to evolve. If we can make it consistent in how it's governed nationally, I think that gives us a fighting chance.
Yeah, you mentioned maybe the guy who makes that NFL money or the NIL money might not be playing in the NFL. I mean, I think about my career. Like, I never played. I'm in a rare camp of All American in college, never played in the NFL. Like, I
Right.
would have made some money. And then I had a quarterback, Power 4 quarterback, call me this offseason, who was starting at a Power 4 school, was very good, and transferred schools. I remember he calls me and he's like, "Hey, Adam, I want your advice. I'm thinking about transfer." I'm like, "Why the hell would you transfer?
Yeah.
Like, you're the starting quarterback at a Power 4 school." He's like, "Well, if I hit the transfer portal, my market value doubles." He's like, "I'm probably not going to play in the NFL for a long time, and he didn't. Transfers, hits the
Mhm.
portal, market value doubles. In my mind, I'm like, it's a great thing that he can do that he can
Mhm.
go get that money, but the fact that he has to hit the portal in order for that to happen, in order
Right.
for that, where he's now more valuable because he can get paid to go to another school, and that, the current school doesn't have either the money or the incentive to keep him. That's the part that I feel like, becomes a little bit of pay for play where,
Yeah.
and hopefully the house case fixes some of that and the schools but the players aren't bonded to contracts like the coaches are, like anyone else. Is that kind of how, like, it's a good thing, but there's also some messiness in that where, you
Sure.
got to hit the portal and then you make more money, and it's tough on the players and the coaches, I think.
Right. And people need to listen to coaches.
Yeah, true.
Okay. And coaches, I know that, coaches are a different breed. Now,
We
I've
both
worked,
know,
I've
yeah.
worked with some, I'm now working with more. They're a different breed, but people have to listen to them. Look what happened at the coaches convention.
Yeah.
They're all unanimously at the table saying, we have to change the timing of this portal in order not to detrimentally impact the product.
Yeah.
The product is not American football, Big Ten football, SEC.
Yeah.
The product is college football. We have to protect
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So when you talk about situations like that, the Adam Brenneman, the former player, understands that,
Yeah.
right? Because maybe it is a window in time where that individual has the opportunity.
Yeah.
But why should they have to hit the portal to reach their market value?
Yeah.
Should we create a system where everyone's market value is evaluated
Yeah.
on an annual basis and they have the ability to earn? But student athletes are headed for contractual agreements
Yeah.
with their institutions and in some case conferences.
Yeah.
That also, I think, will help at least keep everybody accountable
Yeah.
to what it is that they've agreed to versus the free-for-all that we're
Yeah.
seeing right now.
Yeah. One of the most trending topics in college sports is private capital, private equity in college sports. I mean, it seems to be, there's a private equity in college sports event Monday. I mean, like,
Yep.
it seems to be a big topic. I feel like a lot of people are throwing it around without really knowing what it means, what it would look like. I've heard some athletic departments are looking into it right now, but what have you heard about that topic, and how do you see it being a factor in college sports in the next few years?
I do. And this was part of my, pitch when I met with the presidents about this job.
Mhm.
What I'd explained, just having come out of a private equity deal, was if you look at the industry and where it's headed and look at all the financial challenges, because House gets approved, it still presents all these back damage challenges. The money just doesn't drop out of the air.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of capital in the system. Private capital has been investing in sports
Mhm.
for a long time.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? High affinity,
Yeah.
like hugely valuable,
Yeah.
growth at a rapid clip,
Mhm.
and maybe it could be run a little differently or a little bit better. My experience in private capital, the money is great.
Mhm.
The expertise you get from people outside of your space in operations,
How to run a business.
right, event management, financial, like how to financially plan, that I think is arguably more valuable.
Yeah.
I've lost count of the number of firms we've met with, because we see this as a real opportunity for the American.
Yeah.
And it's a way for us to infuse capital. Like, look at the American as a business, say, worth $1 billion.
Yeah.
TV rights, all this money's on the books.
Mhm.
Instead of our institutions waiting for that money every year, I want to front load it to them now to invest in value creating enterprise that generates more brand, more value, more revenue.
Yeah.
So when we get back to the table with our media rights, it's a $3 billion asset where everybody makes money and we can accelerate our growth.
Mhm.
There's definitely a place for it.
Mhm.
I don't think anybody's figured out the code on what it should look like.
Yeah.
I think it'll be different in every place,
Mhm.
but the capital is out there. It's just a matter of, you have to find the right partner.
Yeah.
If it's just about money, you can go and get it. Finding the right partner to invest in your growth and success, that's the part you really have to take your time with.
Yeah. You mentioned the media rights piece of this, and this is more of a question for me than anything else. I'm curious about, I don't even know when your media rights deal is up, but what's that process look like as you start to talk to different media partners about, the American media rights or any conference media rights? Like, what's that? I'm sure you dealt with it some when you were in the media exec on that side of it. So you've seen probably both sides of the table. Like, what's that look like when you're ready to go to the table and talk to the media partners for the conference?
When you're on the buy side,
Yeah.
when I worked at ABC, I cut my teeth as a programming executive. When you're on the buy side, your goal is to really manage the relationship actively when you're in a media rights deal, and to try to renew it before it gets to the market.
Yeah.
Right? Because when it gets to the market, the price automatically goes up. If you're the content provider and you're selling, you want to get to the market, right? But sometimes the fear is, like, we get to the market, what if the market's not as viable at that particular time?
Like Pac-12.
Right. So timing is everything.
Yeah.
So for us, what we're doing is we're in a long-term deal with ESPN.
Yeah.
The beauty of the ESPN deal, it helped us during conference expansion.
Yeah.
We have a broad-based long-term deal that has massive amounts of linear exposure.
Yeah.
By the way, linear exposure is not as easy to come by anymore.
No doubt. Yeah.
So at the same time, you want to have the ability to distribute your product in other ways. So if you have a good TV partner, we have a great one in ESPN, we're talking about, how do we distribute this content in other ways?
Yeah.
We're doing more on Plus than any conference in America. Are there other partners we could sub-license content to? That's the way. Like, you can't just sign a deal and see in 10 years.
Yeah.
You have to actively manage the relationship. The goal for me is, like, the more we do, the more value we create. And when we get back to the table at the end of our deal, I think we'll be able to make a compelling case in the market.
Yeah. I love the stuff that you guys are doing with ESPN and the kind of the studio programming, and Morgan Uber does a lot of it, right? Yeah, it's really, really cool stuff. Shifting away from the kind of the minutia of college sports, I want to ask about your career and all the different stops, maybe as an athlete, as a TV exec, as an AD. Is there one moment you look back on and feel like that moment has shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah, I really think I could talk to you about 4 or 5, but there are 2 in particular, and it's ironic that, they're both tied to Rutgers. My experience as a student athlete, like, you played at that level, you were way better than me. That's the hardest thing that I ever did. Like, there were nights freshman year where I was wondering if I was going to be able to get through it, but it really conditioned me for chaos. And that's what my whole career has been in all these jobs. Like, sports is a chaotic business. The next one was, I got Rutgers into the Big Ten. I've never felt higher professionally, especially because it was my school. Like, I felt like I was giving something back that was permanent.
Yeah.
And 90 days later, I got fired.
Yeah.
And that really tested me. Psychologically, mentally, personally, my family, it was hard. Why am I pointing out that moment? Because it conditioned me in a different way.
Yeah.
Every other opportunity I've had, I feel like I'm more battle tested for it. But sometimes it takes getting stuck holding the bag on something really difficult to really test who you are and your character. There's one or two ways to go at times like that. And as hard as it was for me, I think that really helped me. And I've had unbelievably fun stops and a lot of fun success since then.
Yeah. One of my favorite things in just life is, I got fired from coaching when I was coaching, and in the moment felt like the worst thing ever, right? But what you don't know in the moment is how it impacts the rest of your life. And you think about your career, and maybe getting fired from Rutgers, right, opened up all these opportunities, but you probably wouldn't have been the commissioner right now if you would have still been there, right? So it's cool how I can kind of, you don't actually know if something's good or bad until you see how it impacts the rest of your life.
And you have a moment where you really got to make a tough decision. Because, you're from the Northeast, so you'll get this. Like, I spent a week exiting my deal. I had a media circus on my street in New Jersey. And I went to address the media the day I got fired. And I walked for 50 yards and thought about all the things I could say. And when I got in front of that camera, I remembered that I was going to have one shot to get it right as related to character. And I said a couple things that were important and high level, and I walked away. And I walked away feeling like you did when you got fired, unhireable. My career was over. What was I going to do next? And then the next day the phone starts to ring and you realize the sun is going to come up. But you have to make sure you show people who you are, not only at the good times, but when life is testing you the most.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. It's a great point. I mentioned that a lot of the people that watch this show are, young, hungry in sports. If you had one piece of advice for, someone who's trying to make it in this business, whether it be coaching, administration, media, what would you say to them?
You can't put any more value in anything other than relationships. Relationships make the world go around when it comes to sports. And the most important thing, and I don't think I've done it by design at times, but I did TV and then went and did a startup, which I didn't know anything about. I took an athletic director job. I launched an MLS team. Get outside your comfort zone. Like, spend time every day with someone in your organization or in your company or in your life that does something that you don't know anything about. And my advice always is the same. The opportunities that make you the most nauseous because you're not sure are the ones to just grab onto, just grip it and go.
No doubt. I love that. One of the things about your career, as I obviously have followed it, but I've read more about it as we were doing this interview, is like, you're a deal maker, right? Like, you make deals. That's what you do. Like, every step along the way, you were making deals and negotiating. You got to give me some kind of great negotiation story. Maybe you can leave names out if you have to, whether it be TV contracts, coaches when you're at Rutgers, as the commissioner now. Any great negotiations or anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, there's some really, really fun ones in there.
Some you probably can't share. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I could probably share a bunch of them. You don't have enough time to hear all these stories. But, when I was athletic director at Rutgers, I won't say which game, but we were, invited to a bowl game. And it was a bowl game. They reached out to us. We got all the terms. You have to buy X number of tickets. And the bowl game reached out and they said, we'd like to invite you so long as you step up and buy twice the number of tickets that is required. And we're like, well, why would we do that? They said, well, if you're not willing to do that, there's another school in your conference, which was halfway across the country, that we're going to take. And I remember at that moment, you're either going to acquiesce because you're afraid, or you're going to say what I said, which was, we're not going to agree to sell one more ticket than what the requirement is in the contract that you signed with the league. And if you want to invite that school from Ohio in, and when they have 2,000 people in your building on game day, you'll remember this conversation. And we ended it. 20 minutes later, they called back and said, okay, we're good on the initial terms and we'd like you guys to come to the game. So, and I was still in my 30s. At times when you're faced with challenging stuff in a negotiation, people are going to test you, not because it's non-negotiable, but they want to see how you're going to respond. And my response to that one was like a New Jersey response, like, go to hell. Like, we'll do what this paper says, but if you think I'm going to do something different because you say so, that's not who we are.
You were the youngest AD in the country when you were at Rutgers, right? Was there anything that you were doing consciously to try to, you were in a powerful position, so I'm sure you were taken seriously. But, as I said, a lot of young people watch this. Like, anything you were doing when you were young to, maybe dress the part, maybe so that you were taken seriously and look like you belonged at a young age?
I think part of it was you definitely observe what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And I always used to say, when you're an AD, you're in the Blazer Brigade.
Mhm.
Like you wear a sport coat
Everywhere.
to everything that you do. And even in this job, like I've tried to lean on the quarter zips
Yeah.
more and away
It's a
from the
good look,
jackets,
yeah.
but you try to look the part.
Yeah.
What I learned very quickly, and I've tried to take with me
Mhm.
in every role that I've been in, is you have to make yourself accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
My first few days at Rutgers, like I just roamed around campus and I introduced myself to the people that took the tickets at the games and the janitors and the people
Mhm.
that worked overnight in the building. You can't be in a leadership position
Yeah.
and deal with certain people only. If you
Yeah.
want to create a positive culture, you have to be accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that I developed there because it was the biggest organization I had ever run. I was 37, there was 250 people. Like it was daunting for me.
Mhm.
And I thought, how do I get people to buy in? I'm just going to get to know everybody by name, no
Yeah.
matter what they do.
Yeah.
And same with student athletes. Like I see ADs doing this in our league, which I love. I used to play pickup with women's basketball. I used to
Mhm.
run sprints at 6 a.m. with girls lacrosse. I used to have training table over at football. I used
Yeah.
to ride the bus with the softball team.
Mhm.
You have to be accessible. If you're accessible,
Yeah.
people equate it to you're a human being.
Mhm.
And then it's amazing how much you get out of people when they know you care.
Yeah. What's your workout routine now? What do you
Depends,
lifting,
I mean,
running?
the hard part is the road. I told you about the
Yeah.
number of
Yeah.
miles. I gave up running just
Yeah.
because it hurts too
Yeah,
much
me
at my
too.
age.
Yeah.
But I'm a big walker. I'm walking constantly every day.
Yeah.
Weights a few days a week. My wife and I and our two boys and my 17-year-old daughter, the pickleball thing has become a thing, which has
Love it.
become probably unhealthy competitive, but just played yesterday and my daughter and her boyfriend beat me and my wife, which we're still not
It's
happy
humbling.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you mix it up. But
Yeah.
look, my happiest place is when I'm doing two things. I took up photography 10 years ago,
Oh, cool.
just taking pictures of my kids playing sports.
Mhm.
And now I'm a full-blown photography nerd.
That's awesome.
And when I'm walking on the golf course, like those are the times that I'm really at peace.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. Couple more things for you. The nerd in me wants to ask more about the college football detail minutia questions. I want to ask this one. Revenue distributions with schools.
Yeah.
Some talk or buzz around like performance-based revenue distributions, and is it all equal across every school? How do you view that? Have you given some thought to that?
Yeah, we're moving towards performance-based
Yeah.
revenue sharing. And the good news is we're already doing it in football.
Yeah.
Related to the CFP. So when an American conference institution plays in the CFP, there's a certain amount of money that flows from the CFP to the conference. The participating team will get the lion's share of that money.
Yeah.
Probably in the 70 to 80% range.
Mhm.
Currently in basketball, when a conference institution generates a basketball unit by playing in the NCAA tournament, the value of that unit is shared evenly amongst all the members.
Yeah.
We are discussing making sure that members that help to earn that unit for the conference
Yeah.
benefit more financially.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about other things like what about if an institution has football, men's basketball, women's basketball all finishing the year in the top 25?
Yeah.
Should there be more
Yeah.
for that? So we're moving towards that. And that, as you can imagine, with 15 schools in the room,
Mhm.
a lot of new members, a lot of legacy members, it's challenging to build consensus.
Yeah.
And the response is going to be, well, hey, if we're going to do this, what do we do? Well, you got to do better. You got to invest
Win.
more. It's an incentive too,
Yeah.
psychologically saying to schools, you have to invest all the time, not when you're just
Yeah.
having success.
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent of it. We've spent time with other conferences hearing how they're doing it, and we're developing our point of view. We're actually going to talk about it with our ADs
Mhm.
this weekend in Atlanta.
Yeah, just makes sense from a competitive standpoint too,
Sure.
right? I mean, you should get more if you win. That's how
Sure.
it works.
And you want to make this conference a place people want to come and
Yeah.
want to stay,
No doubt.
where success is rewarded.
Mhm.
Like my dad, passed away when I was 13. He told me this when I was a kid. He said, life's not fair, but it's a meritocracy. And I remember thinking that was a big word. He said, but everything that's provided should be earned.
Yeah.
And that sticks with me because that is the industry we're in. There are some things to be shared evenly.
Yeah.
There are other things that should be provided as a reward for
Yeah.
investment and performance.
Yeah. How about naming rights deals for the conference?
Mhm.
What's your mindset? I mean, I know the Big 12's looked at it. How do you kind of view that as a revenue generator?
We're doing it.
Yeah.
We've been out of the market with it for months.
Okay.
We've worked very closely with a consultant on the outside to do the valuation. And this is some document. You're pulling every piece of real estate on all the campuses in, and then your championships and your TV and even your logo and what it looks like, and coming up with an assessment of the value. We have that, and we're talking to brands about it.
Mhm.
I want to keep the word American in this thing. And so naturally then you're like, oh, what's the list? American Express Conference, American Airlines Conference, American Eagle Conference,
Yeah.
you start to
Should
think.
be a long list, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But this is something that we're going to do.
Yeah.
Our conference name, like I said, it's still in its infancy, and we want to create more equity in the brand.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to give a brand an opportunity to do something that's never been done.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is not just about revenue flowing directly to schools and having them distribute it. If student athletes in a naming rights deal, and this logo looks different because it's got a brand integrated, like a bowl logo, and every student athlete's wearing that, we probably should be sharing some of that revenue directly with every student athlete in the conference. So this idea of how can conference naming rights create a direct to student athlete NIL relationship, that's also never been done. But I'm excited about this. It's going to take some time, but we've got some brands that are really excited at the prospect.
Yeah, that's awesome. I talk a lot about overcoming adversity on this podcast with every coach and administrator I have on. I mean, and we talked a little bit with the time at Rutgers, but is there any other moment in your career where you feel like you faced the most adversity, and ultimately how'd you overcome it?
Yeah, I think it goes back to when I was a kid, honestly. It is with your dad, like they're this invincible, unstoppable force in your life. My dad loved sports. My dad loves football.
Mm-hmm.
If he was alive today, he'd probably be at this game because I remember my dad watching Notre Dame every Saturday.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And when I was 13, when I was 12, he got cancer. When I was 13, he was gone. And it broke me because I was really close with my dad. And the adversity moment was then, but it also was walking out onto the field at Giant Stadium in 1989, my freshman year, in my first game. And I remember being excited and amped up and all the things you feel when you hit the field. And I remember feeling really sad at that moment. And I thought to myself, what would this have meant for my father who loved college football to be able to see this? And it was hard for me. Like, it was an adversity moment. I had to overcome that on game day every day for 4 years. But like I said, this, it's hard playing college football. It changes you as a human being. If I didn't have that experience, I think I'd be different. I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that. Last question for you is, you've had so many different phases of your career and a ton of successes of, the media, as an administrator at Rutgers and now the commissioner of the American. What's your North Star? Like, what is your life's mission when it's all said and done and you retire and you live the twilight years of your life? Like, what do you want it to be that you look back on?
I want to look back.
Loaded question, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I knew you were going to ask something like this. I just knew it. He's going to ask the big picture life question. From a professional standpoint, I want to be able to look back and know that I chose wisely. That, like, when I evaluate opportunities, I evaluate people, the job, and then you deal with the comp and everything else. But I want to know that I worked with great people and that I had an impact on their lives, not just on their work environment. Because, like, I care about people. Like, my Achilles heel and my greatest strength is I care about people. And when I work with people, they know that. The other part is when you got to make a tough decision, that's tough to get when you're in that kind of relationship with people. Second thing professionally is, like, I want to have fun. I know that's not a sexy answer, but if I'm not having fun, I won't do it. If I didn't think this was going to be fun, I wouldn't have pursued it. And, lastly, I want to be in a place where my wife and my kids, and they do appreciate how much I've done to try to create a good life for all of us. But I don't want to be jumping on and off planes when I'm 70 years old doing this. Like, I want to spend more of the rest of my life enjoying what I've built in my personal life, not just out there experiencing what I've done professionally. I don't have an answer on, like, if you're going to ask next what the next job is. I have no idea.
I won't ask you that.
Because you know what? When I was at Rutgers, we got the Big Ten deal done, and the board came to me about a contract extension for like 10 years. And I remember saying to my wife, I know what I'm going to be doing for the next 10 years. And then you're gone 90 days later. And I'm like, I'm never going to look past today again as it relates to opportunities. If you be where your feet are, you do the best you can, the phone rings. It's proven fact.
I thought of one more thing I wanted to ask you. So I do this all the time where I think I'm
No,
done.
you're good. Let's go.
You mentioned the people business, and how do you evaluate talent when you're looking at who you hire? Again, to give some value to the viewers. Like, if you're looking at, you got to hire someone to work for you in the administration office of the American. What are you looking for when you first meet with a candidate?
I don't start with skills at all. And I've learned the easy way and the hard way. Hired a lot of people over the years. You don't get them all right. It's just reality. You don't get them all right. but I start with the soft skills.
Yeah.
And what I typically will always do, and in this day and age with Zoom and everything else, people are getting hired off of video interviews. Like, I will never do that.
Yeah.
I want to bring somebody in and I'm going to throw in an environment with people. I always do what I say is the car wash. Like when I made every big hire at every job I've had, people have had to come in for 2 days and meet with people and do the car wash. And when they don't think I'm looking, I'm observing how they're interacting with other people, how they're treating other people. To me, skills are transferable. So you don't have to find somebody who worked at a conference to find somebody great at the American. The skills are transferable. How they deal with people is a non-negotiable to me. Like I have a sign in my office I've had for a long time, and it's just something that I had made because it's what I believe. It says work hard and be nice. And that's it. So I need to make sure we're identifying people that are going to treat other people in a positive way. Because then I know if I send them out into the world, they're dealing with sponsors and brands and partners and TV partners. They're an extension of everybody that's in that building. So I really evaluate people on the soft skills. You know, naturally, if they don't have the experience, they probably wouldn't be in the room. But I hire potential over talent all the time. And I've gotten more of those right than the other way around.
I like it. I like it. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Congrats on all your success. I'm excited to see, the future of the American. Most bowl wins in college football this season.
Won the bowl challenge
Won
cup,
the bowl challenge,
which I'm getting credit for. I didn't call it play all year, but we'll take it.
You get the credit and the blame when things don't go well, right? Yeah, both. I appreciate taking the time. We'll have to do this every year or something and do it.
I would love it. I'm flattered to be on, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Next up.